All right, so let's go ahead and get started with the space. So, first off, let's introduce what the space will be about and what it isn't. So, this space solely concerns the state of Ukraine's economy from February 24th, 2022 to today, and its future outlook. It does not really look too much at what happened before, its past, although that's important to look at sometimes. Uh, Also, this isn't going to look too much into Russia's economy. There will be appropriate comparisons when they come up, but for the most part, it won't happen. And the point of this space is listen, war is a multifaceted endeavor. You can't solely talk about it in the military sense. You have to understand the economic angle. And some of you may hear that and be like, well, that doesn't fucking matter in this case because, they're getting so much money from, the West, all this shit. It doesn't matter. However, no. All of this does matter. So, in this space, we're going to look at four main topics. The first main topic that we're going to look at is the macro indicators. So, we're going to do some quick analysis on that. So, as a quick preview, of course, it's bad. Listen, of course, it's bad, but there really isn't anything that isn't to be expected. And actually, if you really look at the numbers at face value, they're actually, for what it should be, not bad at all. For what it should be, in the actual sense, yes, of course it's bad. Their GDP is down 29% after the first year and has a very modest recovery. But if you actually stop and take a look at it, if you look at the numbers at face value, you'll be like, well, they're quite resilient. But we'll learn that they're full of it. They're full of it, as we know, 404 is. After that, we're going to talk about international trade and kind of how that's changed over the span of the war. Namely, we'll take a look at the trade balance, and after looking at the trade balance, we're going to look at how their exports changed, how their imports changed. And trust me, this is very important with respect to governmental revenues. Um, and then that would be a good segue. From there, we'll segue into talking about private consumption in general, um, and essentially how the public is perceiving this. What is day-to-day economic activity looking like? Is it changed a lot? Is it more or less business as usual? We'll kind of talk about that. And lastly, and most importantly, we are going to be talking about um, the biggest thing. How is this all being paid for? The state budget. And in there, we're going to address two big elephants that have been came up recently, namely 300 billion US dollars worth of sovereign Russian assets being held in the West, and what could be done with that, what is going to be done with that. And in addition to that, the so-called 500K mobilization. And just to tell you off the bat, guys, with the 500K mobilization, it's not real because it's impossible to do given all the circumstances. Because what it actually is it's Zelensky going after Zelensky. That's all it is. That's all it is. I think Zelensky or somebody from the Genstab said in one of the meetings, we need this many people if we want to be able to win the war. And Zelensky and his political allies jumped on that and they said, oh, well, look at these guys. They're so crazy. All this stuff. We're not crazy. We're not crazy. They're the crazy ones. That's what I think it is. And what do I hope to accomplish with this space? So, I'm going to be honest, guys, especially if you're on the more pro-Russia side, there might be some things you do not like to hear in here. One of which is that Ukraine is going to keep on fighting, regardless of its economic status, at least for another 2 years. 2 years. Um, the money is not a limiting factor at the moment. It's not a limiting factor. However, in that same vein, I'm going to also talk about why Western powers are so keen on making sure Ukraine doesn't fail, because they know I think they're seeing the lining that they can't win, but they have to make sure it doesn't fail the whole project. And as a sub point, I want us also to understand why Russia has been so, how do I say, conservative with their money. I remember when Putin came out and did a speech, a lot of people stayed up. We have idiots like War Monitor. Oh, it's so boring. He talked so much about the economic aspects of the war. Yes, because war is pointless if you end up in a worse economic situation in the long term afterwards. War is literally pointless if you're going to be spending so much money, taking money from foreign lenders that you're going to be fucked for the next 40 years. It's better if they're not gone to war. That's why Russia was so frugal with the central bank. It makes sense now in hindsight. Everything, hindsight's 2020. But it's why its economy was so frugal following the period of 2013-14 that they probably could have grown more if the central bank allowed it. But they were, making a war chest. They were trying to make themselves more immune to sanctions, and listen, this 500K number, it kind of puts into perspective that, listen, if we went with the Gierkenite solution, Russia would be fucked, man. That would cause true social upheaval and true opposition to the war. So these things need to be balanced. The economic aspect needs to be balanced with the political and military aspects. These things do not exist in isolation of each other. So hopefully we'll understand that Russia's we'll understand Russia's moves and hesitations a little bit more. Because listen, sometimes maybe they are being too timid, being too hesitant, but if they need to do a big mobilization, I'm going to tell you guys, they cannot do it on their own. They're going to need it from somewhere else, and that was somewhere else, China. And you take money from somebody, you become somebody's bitch. So let's go ahead and get started with talking about the macro indicators. So obviously, we're going to start off with the GDP. And just quick refresher, if not all of us have taken an economics course, all GDP is that total amount of economic activity within the country for a year. That's it. It doesn't really concern trade, doesn't really concern what's been before, how much goods and services have been done. And so before the war, they produced about $200 billion worth of economic activity a year. And by the end of 2022, that dropped to 160 billion, so roughly 30%, 29 point something. And it's going to rebound maybe 3 to 5% this year. So it's like about a quarter drop to the war. And so they're sitting probably at around 168 billion. And some of you might say, well, we have to adjust for the purchasing power parity. No, we see the exact same trend there. So there's really no reason to do that. And however, this is not the lowest point in GDP. But the thing you have to understand about GDP is that it should be going up over time, right? But if you adjust and make this GDP in constant 2015 dollars, right? Every single year is in 2015 dollars. You kind of make it on the same basis, right? It accounts for the inflation. What happens there is that Ukraine's GDP is its lowest since 2001. And it's very, very low. It's far lower than it was at independence. And I'm going to tell you right now, Ukraine is the country that is doing relatively the worst of all the post-Soviet states when it comes to their level where they were to where they are now. Now, we're going to hear that 30%, and you're going to think, okay, that's horrible. But I want you to think about this. How much did Ukraine's population drop? It went from about 37 million, right, to about 28, 29. Maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. I don't know. Even Ukraine's top demographers don't know. I think her name's Ella Libanova or something like that. She's one of the very few competent people in the government. But if only 29%, this is roughly equivalent to the population drop. And then you also have to think that so many of these industries have been affected. This is actually extremely good. I mean, it's never good to lose a third of your economy, but when you lose a third of your population, you lose a huge part of your industrial base. This seems quite good. Now I'm going to talk about this later, but I want to start bringing it up now. This is very, very misleading because, as we all know, Ukraine is not in this fight alone. They are getting $200 billion worth of aid from all over the world, which is larger than the size of all of their economic activity in the year. And with that aid, they're able to pay salaries. And technically, okay, that money, foreign assistance, doesn't go into the GDP calculation. But then, because they're able to pay these people salaries, the services that they provide, for example, paying firefighters, paying teachers, the services they are providing are now counted into the GDP calculation. So a lot of this actual economic activity is much, much lower than the 29% drop. It's really more like a 40% drop when you look at the raw economic activity that's going on its own basis. But because they are being pumped up so much with these foreign cash, it's really not that big of a drop. Um, and some of you asked me beforehand to do a drop with a GDP composition. So, how did their GDP drop with respect to agriculture, with respect to industry, with respect to services? Really, most of them were consistent. The only one that was not consistent, and we're going to talk about this a lot in the space, was metallurgical production. It dropped by like 70%. And the reason for this is because the industry is just nowhere. And looking at another indicator, all right? So, okay, their GDP fell by quite a lot, but they're being pumped up like crazy. That's a similar thing with inflation. That when the war started, their inflation was around 30%. It was super high. People, I don't know if you guys remember, but there was these huge bread lines in Odessa, Nikolaev. I mean, there's still some that exist in like Chernigov and places like that, but they were quite rampant. But now Ukraine's economy has actually hit a low over the past few years, before the war even. And if you're wondering, okay, wait, their economy dropped by so much, so much stuff's going on. How is this the case? It's because it's very pegged to the US dollar. And American experts are working on keeping this pegged and keeping the prices stable. So in general, on the inflation front, they are doing quite good. Prices are not out of control anymore, like they were at the very beginning of the war. And although people have gotten poorer, there's been no mass breakdown. However, this is going to come with its own challenges, because if you guys know, if you guys peg a currency to something, right? If you keep it consistent to something, you can't do currency manipulation, and you can't just fire up the printer. Because when you need to pay more money for state salaries, all that stuff, well, you need to get the money. It has to be real. When the currency is pegged, it has to be real. You have to get that money from somewhere. And, the amount of foreign aid is limited. So this actually constrains Ukraine in a little bit. It's a trade-off. They decided, listen, inflation control is more important than us being able to print money so we can pay more salaries. And now looking at the job market, officially, they're sitting at about 21% unemployment. It peaked high 30s, which was one of the highest in the world. They still are one of the highest of the world, but the rate is extremely high. The resume turn-in rate, so that's an economic indicator that's being tracked, is lower than it was at previous levels. And however, employment is still there. A lot of people do not have employment, but they somewhat rebounded over 2023 as things, quote unquote, returned to normal. And now, when we look at consumer spending, it dropped by 26%. And I'm going to ask you guys, doesn't this sound familiar? This is roughly the 29% from the GDP calculation. And the same thing I'm going to bring up here. This is a miracle of some sorts, because this is almost equivalent to the population drop, but also this doesn't account for the fact that people are now much more timid in their spending. I'm going to talk about that when we talk about private consumption, but people are more timid in their spending, and the drop they had this year is actually less than the drops in 2014-15, which were 12 and 19%, so total of 31% total. And this rate, I'm going to be honest, this is when I started doubting the official statistics. And I'm going to bring up one statistic later in this space that just completely shows they sometimes make some stuff up, and there is a reason. There's a very particular reason why they make stuff up. And when you guys hear it, you're not going to believe it. And you're going to be saying, no, there's no way they do that. But it is. It is. I can promise you, I can assure you, knowing what I know about Ukraine, it is. But to conclude, when you look at all these macro indicators on face value, officially, Ukraine's economy is not doing too badly. And although I have my doubts about some of the numbers, I think they're more or less right, minus a couple of them. The GDP and private consumption are fairly mirrored. It's exactly what we would expect. The inflation isn't comically high, and we're not seeing the inflation be comically high because you're not really seeing those breadlines and all of that anymore. You're seeing you're not seeing that popular upheaval quite yet, like you would, for example, in Russia in World War One. The reason why things failed is because all these prices got too high, so there's a huge pushback. Everything is still somewhat normal according to the statistics. No, yes, their GDP dropped by a lot, the private consumption dropped by a lot, but that's relative to the population drop. So, for all the faults and retardations of the so-called Western partners, on a macro scale, if you just look at it as is, you don't look into the cracks, you don't look deep in, things are more or less good. You only really see that this is all built on a just house of cards if you really take a deep dive. So that's what we're going to do in a little bit. Because the Western partners, they understand this. If the economic situation gets way too bad, dude, it's going to be, it's over. They've already had a lot of casualties. They haven't been making progress. They've been made promises that haven't been kept. And now if they can't afford things, they can't buy things, it's going to be like, it's going to be like the conditions that let a group of relative nobodies in Russia in 1917 take over the whole country. So the civilized world understands this. And they understand that they have to keep it afloat. But as I said, this is complete life support. Okay, so now let's talk about the trade. In short, this is, when I talked about the macro indicators, I said, okay, this is actually kind of good for Ukraine. I can't say the same here. There's in no world, even if looking at official statistics, oh my God, it is horrible. Their trade deficit has ballooned to, by the end of this year, it's going to be about 30 billion. That's higher than last year. It's only getting worse as time goes on. And in fact, I'm going to share something quite funny I actually came across. November actually saw the trade deficit alleviate a little bit. And I want you guys, before I explain why, think about why did they alleviate? I want you to think about this. I want you to think, why do you think the trade deficit alleviated? And the actual reason, this is not conjecture or stuff you just see on Twitter or Facebook. The chairman of the Verkhovna Rada, that's in charge of the foreign trade, he came out and stated the reason why the trade deficit wasn't so bad this month was because the Polish and Slovaks were blocking the border, so we couldn't get as many imports. So we're trying to buy the stuff, we're trying to get the stuff in, but because they're blocking it, the trade deficit wasn't so bad. So if that doesn't explain to you the situation, how it is, I don't think anything will. But the main reason for this trade deficit is, of course, how it is. Exports are way, way down for multiple reasons. One, the capacity is there, less people are doing things, less people producing things. And two, exporting is way harder because of the Black Sea. And secondly, is because consumption levels are still quite high and they need more stuff actually. So, for example, electrical machinery, things for transportation, like all the pickup trucks that you see in those FPV videos, all the plastics they need to make the so-called 1 million drones that they'll make. Ukraine's industry cannot keep up with the capacity. So you still need to import that. And additionally, you see those videos of, remember the strike, it was either Kramatorsk or Slavyansk, I don't remember. I think Kramatorsk, of those guys, hanging out a pizza shop, drinking some Heinekens, all this stuff. All that stuff is still being imported. The beers, the household appliances that Russians steal the microchips from, just video games, all that kind of stuff is still being imported because, like I said, the West understands one thing, that they need to keep the populace happy. So all this stuff is still being imported, but in the meantime, Ukraine cannot match that with its exports, because Ukraine's exports were two things before the war: foods, so stuff like corns, wheats, seeds, oils, all that stuff, accounted for about 35-40% of all of their exports prior to the war. And then their second largest category, which accounted maybe 25-30%, was the metallurgical industry. So pig iron, steel, rolled, flat, all of that stuff, coke. And the first industry is down slightly. It actually didn't do horribly bad in 2022 because Russia decided to shoot itself in the foot and agree to the Black Sea Grain Initiative deal. That was just pure mental retardation that they agreed to it. I have no idea what they were thinking. This is a case of just pure incompetence on their part, in my opinion. And it let the exports remain quite high. How them pulling out of it was one of the best moves they've done. But the more important thing that we're going to talk about is how their metallurgical industry is absolutely gutted. It's gutted beyond belief. And I want you to think about it. Two of the largest plants that prior to the war were about 35% of all the steel production are now gone, never to be returned to Ukraine. The Ilyich plant and Azovstal, that was a third of all steel production gone. And not only that, not only are they gone, but they were amazing, in an amazing location. I mean, think of Azovstal; it's right there on the port. It's not right on the port, but it's so easy. There's a train that goes directly to the port. It's so easy to export, and now you export it via the sea. And just to give you a scale of how bad things are going, in terms of production of metallurgical items, and let's just talk about steel, because all of them have followed the same trend. In 2021, they produced 22 million tons. In 2022, 6.3 million. Absolute disaster. And then in the first 9 months of this year, right, 2023, a lot of articles come out of Ukraine's economic return. Do I know how much they produced? 3.9 million. And what's the reason for this? It's not like there isn't a need for it. There is a need for it, don't get me wrong. But because there's not enough buyers, and the reason there's not enough buyers is people still need steel, but it's way too expensive nowadays, because the limit for rail exports is about 3 million tons a year. And it's about 4 times more expensive. And this is me saying this. This is one of the heads of Zaporozhye Stal saying this. And actually, we're going to get to this later, but Ukraine has put additional cargo rail tariffs that push up the cost another 30%. And Ukraine in total has only been able to get 100,000 tons through their Black Sea humanitarian corridor hugging the coast initiative bullshit that they're saying they won the Battle of the Black Sea with. They've only been able to push 100,000 tons. So it's way too expensive to do rail. Not only is it, just in general, but now they have an additional tariff. There's a hard limit to how much they can do. And because Russia decided to pull out the Black Sea grain deal and decided, hey, listen, let's stop being retarded, it has just made all production go way down, because not only do they have much lost capacity, but now they don't have the funds to keep it going. They don't have the customers. And although domestic demand is actually a little bit up because of the armed forces Ukraine want to buy more, want to get more steel, which is expected, it's still just not enough. For example, and then one more thing is that when they were bombing the electricity system with hundreds of missiles and drones, the head of Zaporozhye Stal, which is currently now I think the biggest, maybe not the biggest, but I think the biggest remaining one, complained that because of the blackouts last winter, production costs went up 2 to 3 times. And man, if it's just, That's another advantage to those things. So if Russia really wants to push its advantage and keep jacking up that trade deficit, making it worse and worse, they really need it. I think they dropped the ball by not really doing it too much this time around. Um, but now let's take a look at. Let's go back to the foods. As we know, um, the exports stay quite high um, the first time around, but now they're struggling quite a lot because even though they have established this new way to get out of Odessa and Chornomorsk, it's not enough. It's not enough because they're saying that well, we were able to do few million tons. That's nowhere near enough, and the Danube ports, it's also not enough. So they're down in both wheat and corn about 30% from the same time period last year, which is excellent. You want this to go down because you want the Ukrainian government getting less liquid cash into their system. You do not want them to get more and more money. And this actually causes a synergistic problem because now that less stuff is coming, less revenue for the government is coming. What do? Because they need the money somewhere. So what they do is bureaucracy. Essentially, what they say is, okay, now everybody who is going to export grain, export food in general, rapeseed, grain, sunflower oil, whatever. If you're going to do that, you're going to need to register and be 100% good. You're going to have operations before the war. We want to see all your tax records and licenses, and we have to see all this stuff before you can go. And people are now complaining that it's taking twice as long for ships to start loading. And some ships are waiting 11 days just to berth in the Danube ports and another 14 to get clearance and pass the canal. And delays can take up to a month. And some people are saying, man, I don't even want to do this. This is too much work. So because Ukraine's government's retarded, it creates a synergistic effect. So honestly, pulling out the Black Sea grain deal and just making the Black Sea difficult to traverse, they really need to hamper down on that. We saw recent pictures of the drones, the underwater drones that Russia's finally starting to develop. They really need to hurry up with that and just blow up a ship or two if they really want to push this advantage. Because right now, if they're able to start getting more volume through the Black Sea, like the Chornomorsk, Odessa ports, it's going to really cut into that advantage. But they're in a really good spot in pressure in Ukraine right now when it comes to getting exports down, because you keep doing this, you keep making it difficult for Ukraine. That's less revenue, which really is going to hurt. And yeah, so in general, when it comes to imports and exports, they're still importing a lot of stuff. They still get stuff. They need buy drones. They need electrical transformers to deal with Russia strikes. People are still going to bars. People are still buying up discretionary goods. And so imports have remained high, but the exports have just plummeted because Russia has finally made some good moves and understood that this war is multifaceted. And if you really want to hurt Ukraine, you have to hit them where it hurts, which namely, in terms of revenues, the government getting less revenues. Okay, so with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the private consumption part. So, as I said, Ukraine's private consumption is quite down. It's fell by about 26%, and that is of course really really bad. And we have to understand why. So the breakdown of Ukraine's jobs by sector is that it's 15% agriculture, 60% services, and a quarter, so 25% industry. Now with agriculture, jobs there and production there and private trade there is still quite good. Although large corporations are buying up family farms, as to be expected. Services are actually doing okay, except select services. For example, tourism is down like 80%. It was a statistic I could find, and the only people really going in are Protestant missionaries or some kind of bloggers. I remember like there's some Asian blogger guy who did Airbnb, and like I think like some Ukrainian stole his like camera and like beat him up or something. I was like, dude, what are you expecting, you fucking idiot? He's like, oh, I had such a good time. The people there are so nice, bro. Some guys like trying to beat you up, whatever. Um, and it's generally quite proportional. But what has changed is manufacturing jobs. And when you don't have a job, you can't spend money the same way you do. And when it's looking at the jobs, a lot of people lost it. For example, at Zaporozhye Stal, they had 10,000 employees, 2,000 are just gone. And there's more who've left since then. So it's like a quarter of all employees have lost their jobs. And that really affects people's buying habits because people um, before the war were thinking about, I think people were thinking before the war about planning most of their purchases. Well, the rate was 24%. In 2022, the rate jumped to 42%, and this rate has only increased to 46%. So that means about half of Ukrainians are doing a budget for even spending money on stuff like food, clothes, that kind of stuff. They're making budgets. So they're less likely to go out and spend stuff. And the amount of Ukrainians who are saving, let me find the statistic, I have it written down. Um, yeah, the amount of Ukrainians who are saving has gone up. Sorry, guys. Save. Let's see. Yeah, 86% of Ukrainians now say they're saving more money. And economics 101 is if you're not spending money, that means somebody else isn't getting money. And so private consumption in general is going down. However, people are still spending money. I'm going to speak a little anecdotally. Man, the places are still open. If you go to a city, especially in the western part of Ukraine, people are still spending money at quite insane rates. They go out with their friends, they go to the restaurants, they go to the bars. You know, you see the videos of people at the clubs. It's not all just rich people. Some people are just normal people who want to go to the club. And with all of this being said, you know, maybe they're switching over to cheaper brands, cheaper foods. They're doing a little less name brand stuff, but people are still overall spending money. Um, because there's been a lot of, I'm going to be honest, decent government initiatives to get them to spend, even though people are in this saving attitude. A lot more people are okay with spending money as long as they think it's doing something good for the country. Um, you know, Ukrainians are more likely to buy goods if they think that it helps the armed forces of Ukraine. That's a statistic. So as long as they're able to do it like that, they're able to kind of convince a lot more people, hey, we need to buy this stuff. And so, with all of this being said, all of this leads down to the most important aspect of this space. How is this war being spent? You know, where is the budget coming from? And I'm going to be honest, guys, this is truly, you know, is a tragedy. I don't know if you guys know who I am. I am Ukrainian myself, but man, if unless Russia just completely takes over the country, dude, Ukraine's fucked forever. It's like, you know, Argentina, it started taking these IMF loans decades ago, and it's still fucked. They got some guy, you know, saying all this stuff, I'm going to fix it. No, he's not. No, he's not. Javier Milei or whatever his name is. You know, they are the IMF's bitch for life. They are JP Morgan's bitch for life. They're Goldman Sachs bitch for life because of all the mistakes they made. In Ukraine, it's going to be even worse. I think it's going to be the worst, like, case of modern economic, um, you know, indentured servitude ever, because it already exists and it's only going to get worse. Because, you know, for the 2024 budget, they anticipate revenues of 43.7 billion, and this is before grants and loans. That's insanity. I'm going to tell you guys, I don't know how they get that 43.7 billion, because they were making that much roughly before the war. So yes, they've made tighter taxes. They've made they've hampered down. Their revenue services have internal revenue systems have gone up. They've gone after people not paying taxes. But I'm going to bring up something in a second that's going to show you guys that that's a made up number. And why would they make up that number? It's for you. It's for you. It's not for America. America knows exactly how much they're making. It knows exactly how much money they need. Europe probably knows this too, but they are just making stuff up. But if we look at the official numbers, they say they're going to make 43.7 billion, and they're going to spend 83.2 billion. Essentially, they are spending a little over 43 billion on the military. So all of the revenues, state revenues. So all the tariffs, all the taxes, all of the profits from selling commodities, it is all going towards the military. And when it comes to everything else, it has to be covered by foreign aid. It has to be covered by foreign aid. There's no other way. And the thing is, as we're going to talk about, that's going to be harder and harder as time goes on. And they say, oh well, we're going to help get this because we're going to raise more taxes, even though people are leaving and all this stuff. It's all nonsense. Because I'll tell you how I know their numbers are nonsense. Let's find this. Occupied. Yeah. So Ukraine said that they made about 40 billion, right, or something like that, in taxes and all that stuff. Well, one of their guys, their finance minister Marchenko, he said that 2.3 million individuals and organizations in occupied areas, so Donbass, Zaporozhye, Kherson, paid 9.5 billion in taxes. They're saying 2.3 million individuals paid over a quarter of all the taxes, and these are people who live in areas now controlled by Russia. What are they making up, man? And I talked about this in the TWK chat, right, in the Timur criminal chat, and Albania, he says, well, that's obviously Akhmetov. But I went and did some research. Akhmetov, he only claimed to pay 2 billion total in taxes, and only some of that is from his revenues in southern and eastern Ukraine. Some of them is from his areas in Kryvyi Rog, from his businesses in Kiev. So they're essentially saying that people in Kherson, Zaporozhye, Donetsk, Lugansk are way richer than the rest of Ukraine, and they're paying all these taxes, and they're braving the risk of retribution from quote-unquote Russian punishers who have a fondness for brutality. That's their quote, not mine. They're just making stuff up. And when I was reading this, I was talking with a few other people. I'm like, why would they make this stuff up? This narrative that they're able to still get as much tax as people are paying. They're risking their lives to pay these taxes. It's all a con to prove a narrative that we're still in the game. That this is a true good organization to fight for. The people who are funding it, they know the real numbers. They don't. It's not for them. It's for you guys. It's for NAFO. It's just these feel-good BS articles that are just meant to trick people. And the reason they're doing this is because the reality is so ugly. The reality is so ugly because they are spending twice as much on expenses as they're making. It's insanity. And essentially, before the full-scale invasion, their state debt was 49% of GDP. Within a few months, it's going to be 100%. It's doubled. The percentage has doubled. And this is even considering U.S. grant support. And grants, for the record, they're not loans. They're just free monies. Of course, not free, but kinda. And this is insanity. This is not the real country. And now they're being burdened with all this debt because they need to keep borrowing. And I'm going to tell you guys, this is nothing new. Because I want us to take a step back. This all started with the Maidan, right? But what happened before the Maidan? What was the Maidan about? What triggered the Maidan? It was because of Yanukovych deciding to sign a deal with Russia instead of signing a deal with the EU. Now, what was that about? Well, Ukraine, of course, is the cokehead that needs more money because they always do stupid shit. So they essentially needed about 14, $15 billion. And the IMF, which was already starting to punish them with their austerity and stuff, said, okay, listen, we're going to keep giving you loans. We're going to give you a $14 billion loan. And what you need to do for us in return is that you need to create, you need to get rid of subsidies on gas. So people need to pay way more on gas. And you need to sign a deal with the EU. And Putin came in at the last second and said, listen, I'm going to give you a much better deal. You're going to get a $15 billion loan at maybe at a lower interest rate. And additionally, instead of getting austerity with respect to gas, I'm going to give you a 33% discount on gas. And gas, by the way, which Ukraine has already been stealing for years. So they're stealing it. They're stealing it. Russia knows this. That's caused problems before. They're saying, listen, we're your friends. We're going to help you out. And so Yanukovych, for all his idiocracy, went with, the same deal. But of course, that triggered the Maidan and all this stuff. And okay, they ended up taking that $15 billion loan from the IMF because they signed a trade deal with the EU once the new government came in. And what did that cost? That caused an immediate 50% increase in the price of natural gas. And additionally, this is one of the craziest things ever. One of the aspects of these loans was that they would set up a governmental organization, NABU, which essentially monitors the corruption. And one of the things they set up was an e-procurement website, which all Ukrainian state purchases, everything, even military equipment, has to go through. It's called Prozoro. I think it's made by Americans. And everything, all state monopolies, all governmental goods, everything has to be purchased through there. And essentially, this is a really good con because before the war, this is definitely worse now. Before the war, 40% of Ukrainian state purchases were for foreign suppliers. For reference, in the US, UK, it's about 6% each. So think about that. These countries come in with a loan. We're going to save you. You're broke, but we're your friends. We're going to give you money. Oh, by the way, don't invest in your own industries. Don't invest in your own country. We're just going to give you these loans, and you're going to have to buy our stuff with these loans. And then you're going to be more broke because you can't make enough money in terms of revenues. So you're going to need more and more stuff. And that's essentially what's happening now. Even with the EU loans that we're talking about, yeah, they don't have to be paid back right now, but interest is being accrued, and it's 7% interest rate, and they have to start paying 2027. And we talked about this. The reason I talked about the imports exports before, where are the revenues going to come from? The private consumption is down. Where's the tax revenues going to come from? They're not coming from anywhere. They're doing this so they can completely control the country and rip it for pieces. They're like a vulture, just taking away the parts and implementing all this austerity. And of course, they're cokeheads, and they need to get their necks high, so they need to keep agreeing to this. So there is one thing that could maybe stop this, and this right here. Oh, it's a scary situation. It's the $300 billion of Russian sovereign assets that are being held in the US and the EU. The United States, I think, has already made a decision that all of their assets in their country, and the United Kingdom is going along with this too, they are just going to steal those assets for sure. And they are already looking at, okay, where are we going to transfer these assets to? They're thinking the World Bank, they're thinking other things. However, the European Union, I don't think is going to do that because they do not have the economic strength of the United States. And they know that this is going to collapse. This is going to be very bad for the euro. So the reason why I don't think the EU is going to do this is because at the moment, they're still arguing whether or not to do a windfall tax on the profits from Russian assets. So it's going to be like 15 billion over a few years. And so they're essentially near 100% windfall tax, and they take that and they transfer that to Ukraine somehow, or maybe use that to make up the money that they sent to Ukraine. So, but the possibility of, the funds being held in Belgium, which is about 200 billion of the 300 billion, is still possible. And it's going to be hard to say what will happen then, because that changes everything. If that happens, man, this war is going to enter in a new phase. I don't think Ukraine is going to win, but it's going to be a new phase. And what will Russia do in return? The answer is very clear. If Ukraine gets like 80 billion of stolen assets, what does Russia have to do? As it costs 160 billion, as it costs 200 billion in damages. They have to bomb Zaporozhye, they have to bomb Terex Pro, they have to bomb all of Akhmetov's sites in Kryvyi Rog. They have to bomb critical infrastructure resources. They have to do that. That's the only option. Because yes, you can steal some American assets, you can steal some British assets, but there's not that much. They just have to bomb and create so much money to show the Europeans you send over these assets. There's just going to be more and more pain for Ukraine. It's not going to change anything. And now, when you send over the assets, there's virtually nothing you hold over our head. Only thing you have is sanctions, and we don't. And Russians aren't stupid; those are never going away at this point. So, yeah, when it comes to the budget, man, the Western capital is going to keep the gravy train going. But what's happening is a tragedy. The austerity we're going to see once this is all said and done, once there's a Minsk 3, once there's an Istanbul 2, I'm going to tell you guys, people are going to die. We talked about the Holodomor. This is going to be a Holodomor part 2. And, you think the refugee crisis is bad, man? Their population will fall below 20 million. All will be left as old people. Because the coming austerity, they're just going to rip it apart. They're going to rip apart asset by asset. Anything they can steal, anything they can take, they're going to do it. Because Ukraine, there's no way they're going to repay all of the money they own, not only to sovereign lenders like EU, Germany, Japan, but also to private lenders like JP Morgan, Goldman, Citibank, BlackRock, all that stuff, man. It's already the beginning with agriculture. They're signing over people's farms to these huge corporations. They're signing over real estate. Man, what we're going to see is it's going to be a tragedy. But yeah, that's it. Those are the main points I wanted to cover. So now the time is yours. I'm going to ask, if you decide to ask a question, please be respectful. Try not to get too off topic. But yeah, guys, if any of you want to talk, make some comments, debate a point, time is yours. Yeah. What's up? Go ahead, get started.
My question would be, it would be a simple question, but what do you think, like how Ukraine would, what would be the best way out for Ukraine if in case possible? We know that they're not going to take that one.
Listen, the best way out is go to rehab, because right now they're a drug dealer, going for the next high, going for the next high, regardless of the opportunities. It's their best option is literally go with Russia, have Russia pay the debts. That's it. That's it. That's the only option, because they're not going to win this war, and the West, they're not going to forgive them. They don't give a fuck, man. They don't give a fuck. Your best option right now is cry to Russia, say, we made a mistake. We're so sorry. We're so sorry. We're so sorry. Please. And Russia has shown in the past that they do forgive debts, that they'll help pay Ukraine's debts. That's really the only option if they don't want a lifetime of austerity. That's it. That's the only option. So yeah, Chuni.
Hello. Hello?
Yeah, what's up?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. So I'm just like wondering, do you think so the Congress has extended their sessions, so they're probably gonna accept the 50 billion, but like do you think that like the 60 billion, do you think like combined with the 50 billion like Ukraine aid is just gonna be same old with like just massive um just like complete coverage of like Ukrainian like national salaries and like military equipment, or do you think they're gonna like focus more on like just supplying more like military equipment and like maintenance, um or just like keep paying for jobs?
I mean, you can't have one or the other. You have to have both, because the thing is, like I said in the beginning of the space, if you let the economy fail, if you stop paying the civil servants, the whole society goes to shit. And there's no point in paying all these soldiers, because now that's going to go to shit too. So you
Yeah.
need to pay everybody's salaries. So I'm going to tell you right now, straight up, it's going to happen. In the meantime, what Ukraine is doing in the meantime, they are going to other U.S. lapdogs like South Korea, Japan, and they're covering in the meantime for January, for February, their budget deficits. So they're
So
going to get the money.
Abdel-Mahrmud did say that the South Korean massive like ammo shipments were like required a lot of political capital from the U.S. and it was like very unpopular in South Korea. And I imagine it would be like even more unpopular in Japan. So like, do you think there would be like any like pressure for like the Japanese government to like stop like sending massive billions, like, or
I mean,
like
the
do you
thing
think
is,
it will be one
they
off?
already did. They already did. They're already covering for January. January is being covered by the Japanese. They're helping cover the next month. And the thing is, it's unpopular, but hey, listen, the Japanese constitution was written by Americans. Japanese can't do shit. I mean, that's the point of being a lapdog. You do whatever your master tells you. And so, yes, it's unpopular, but you know what else is unpopular? The American soldiers raping women in Okinawa. They haven't been able to do anything for however long that's been going on. So I think it's going to be more of the same. They're going to keep bullying their so-called friends into giving more money until the political impasse in the U.S. Congress and in the European Union passes. It will pass. They will pass the aid. However, the thing is, with respect to the aid, is that it's not enough, because the thing is, it's going to keep the war going. It's going to keep it so Ukraine doesn't collapse, but it's not enough for Piramucha. It's not enough.
Yeah, also like do you think that like the age like so about like Ukrainian men under 25, so I know like conscript Ukrainian conscripts are like under like 24, like they're not sent to the front at all, so like they're basically like doing nothing. um and also like the 25-year-olds and below aren't being like drafted. Like do you think there'll be like a massive like do you think these like 25-year-olds and below will be like very like enthusiastic because like they're the most sfidomite and they're generally like are less employed, so like it's just not gonna be like a big economic impact if like hundreds of thousands of them are drafted plus and like equipped with like the $60 billion of aid.
I mean, listen, some of them do want to go to the front lines because Ukraine did cut pay for soldiers who are not at the front line to actually a pretty bad level. So some of them actually are eager to go to the front line. Not many nowadays. After seeing what's happened, they're aware of what happened in Bakhmut. They're aware of what happened in the Rabatina. They're aware of what's happening on the opposite bank on Kherson. They're aware of this, but some of them just need the money. So yes, I agree. But the issue with this, man, is that, listen, there's going to be enough to send those guys. There's going to be enough to maybe even equip them. There's going to be enough to pay the salaries. But the issue right now is not really an economic one, because there's enough Western capital to cover for all that, for the salaries, for equipping them. But the thing is, man, if you're going to do a 500K mobilization, you're going to need thousands of tanks. They already got them a thousand tanks or so, and that took massive efforts. They had to go everywhere, strong arm everybody, and they got them their stuff. They got them their stuff. They got them exactly what they asked for. Ukraine loves to say no. They didn't give us enough. No, they asked for 1,000 armored vehicles. They got 1,500. But the issue with the mobilization talks is not exactly that it's too expensive. It's too expensive even with the 60 and 50 billion. I'm going to tell you that. But maybe Western capital can find more. It's too expensive in that the equipment simply doesn't exist for this right now. They're going to need.
It exists like it doesn't exist for like the fantasy Peremoga offensive, like Crimean Beach Party, but it does exist to like basically like deadlock the Russians, which has me worried.
Maybe, maybe not. It's hard to say. Because the thing is, yes, you could mobilize this. It's going to take a gargantuan effort. But man, it's like you're going to need so many more trainers. You're going to need so much more political will from third countries like Pakistan and all these places. And the thing is, the trends right now are just not in Ukraine's favor. That's a different space for a different time. But honestly, it's just not in their favor right now. So.
Also, I like two last points. So apparently like Turkey hasn't like looked for another engine supplier like for its like new drones. It's still like looking for the Ivchenko. It's still like ordering the Ivchenko engine. So does that mean that Russia like failed to destroy the Motor-Sich plants? Like are the like Ukrainian like can Ukrainians like get like money from like Motor-Sich?
No. So
Because
Mussa-raseh, Zaporozhye, all these places that have been bombed, even the factory in Kharkov, they're still operating at a reduced capacity. They were hit pretty badly, but they're still operating at the reduced capacity. So they are still making some money. This does contribute to state revenues. But as I told you, man, about like 80-90% comes from grains and metallurgical items.
yeah, but like why doesn't Russia like, completely destroy them? The like Motor-Sich isn't that big as far as I know.
Motor-Sich isn't that big, and they did big damage to it. I think back April 2022, and they hit it again in November, and again I think this year. The issue is you have to keep bombing it and bombing it and bombing it, and the thing is, they don't make that much, man. They make some money, but it's the thing is, the question then comes, why don't they bomb Ferrexpro? Why don't they bomb Zaporozhye Stal? They have to bomb all these other things. And the reason why I think is because it's just an extra card. Because the thing is, remember what I said at the end, that the card that the West holds over Russia right now is a 300 billion in sovereign assets. And my thinking, my hope at least, is that if they decide to steal it and break international law and break all norms and conventions, that Russia will cause a not only proportionate amount of damage on Ukraine to how much they lost, but even more. So that's my hope.
Do you think China will like do some financial nukes? Like,
no, I mean, listen, China will sit in the corner. They'll sit in the corner and smoke and watch however it turns out. China will try to make some plays. Maybe some. I was talking about this. They'll try to get a few guys who are kind of on the fence to, instead of investing in the EU or US, invest in the Great Bank of Xi. They will get some guys. They will get some more neutral countries signed up on that. But it's just Western capital is still too strong. That's why I don't think Russia's response should be an economic one in the traditional sense. It should just be an economic one in the TWK sense of, okay, you're going to steal our money. Okay, we're just going to cause more damage on Ukraine to where the point it doesn't matter. And now you don't have this leverage over us.
Gotcha. And the last thing I wanted to say was that basically Ukraine isn't like, if the war ends in like a stalemate and Russia doesn't take any more like major settlements, like Ukraine is definitely a viable state. Like Russia has taken like no like oblast centers, oblast capitals like since the SMO. and basically like Odessa and Nikolaev were far more developed and like more important than like Berdyansk or like the Azov coast, and it still has like megapolises like Kharkov, Kryvyi Rog, Zaporozhye. It's like almost like all the major major like industrial and like population centers are like in Ukraine aside from Donetsk. That's it. That's so basically they're like completely like a viable state. It'll just be very poor and be like just be used as like a cheap labor pool by the West.
I mean, yes, in the sense you're right. I mean, listen, it'll keep going, but it's going to be, man, it's going to have a smaller population than Romania if you let that corpse keep going. Because the thing is, Russia did take Mariupol, which, as I said, was about a third of all steel production, and steel was 30% of all, not steel, metallurgical items. So steel, pig iron, all that stuff was a third of all exports. A third of all exports. So Mariupol was a big victory. Donetsk, in general, holding that and not having to capture it was very good. But yes, it is somewhat viable. But the problem is the population, man. It's that it's going to keep dropping and dropping because Ukraine was a dangerous state, not because they were super rich and industrialized. No, 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 no. It's because they inherited a big army and they had a relatively big populations. Now their population, if you let the state wither, if you let the austerity set in, it's going to keep withering and withering away. So the thing is, it's still going to remain a threat to Russia in a sense, but it's going to be a much more muted threat. And I think maybe that's the goal of Minsk 3 is that, hey, we weren't able to fully win this time around, but let's hope that the damage after this makes it much easier for when we try to finish up the job in 2030 something.
Yeah, but like there will be if Minsk 3 happens and like borders are delineated, like we will see like U.S. Army like tank bases in Sumy and Chernigov, Slavutich. There will be like by the 2030s there will be like joint NATO like armored brigades there. Like
I mean, man, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that. The thing is, I think in the Minsk 3, there will be something to prevent that because I don't think they have enough leverage to allow for that right now at the moment. I have my own opinions on how Minsk 3 will play out, but I don't think that there's going to be American bases in Sumy or Chernigov, or I don't think there's going to be bases in Kharkov. I don't think that. I'm going to be honest with you, because Russia's going to keep fighting if it sees that that's still a viable option. It's just going to keep going and going and going. And
Gotcha.
as we see, Ukraine cannot keep going and going and going. It's not. They're not going to hit a breaking point in 2025, 2026, but by 2027, it's going to start unraveling, man. It's going to start unraveling, because the thing is, then 2027 is when they start having to pay their payments. The interest has been accrued the whole time. It's going to be difficult for anyone to keep supplying. It's going to be difficult for Russia in the meantime, but Russia's going to keep going. They're not that retarded. I'm going to say that they are retarded. They're led by some idiots, but I think they're aware of that. They're aware of that. That they cannot allow for American bases sitting east of the Dnieper. All right. Does anyone else want to hop in? All right. If not, I'm very, very happy all you guys showed up. Oh, wait. Someone has a request. What's up, man?
One comment, and In the last 2 days, a lot of Western media have reported that the Black Sea corridor is working, and that in the last 2 months, 10 million tons of cargo have been exported out of Ukraine. So there are two questions. First, can they sustain this on this level, 5 million tons a month? And second, if they can, what is the impact on the budget and on their war economy of this export route being open?
So yeah, this is a huge concern. I'm actually trying to pull up a statistic I saw with respect to this. So if I can find it, I can find it. If I can't find it, I can't find it. But yes, there are new exports going out of Chornomorsk and their supports, and this is a problem because if this continues, okay, here I have it. I have it. So in August, they had 0 million tons of grain exports leave the Black Sea ports. They had 2.2 million tons out of the Danube ports. In November, according to state statistics, they had 2.5 million tons leave the Black Sea ports and 1.2 million leave the Danube ports. Mind you that during the height of the Black Sea deal, it was 3.6 million leaving the Black Sea ports, and before the war, it was 6.8 million. But that's the point. That's besides the point. The point is that they're getting stuff through because yes, they are somewhat doing the core. They're doing the thing where they hug the coast, and so that is a limited capacity. It's a limited capacity, but there is still a capacity nonetheless. So the solution for this is kind of what I said, is that Russia has to step up its game of these unmanned drones that Ukraine has been using, unmanned, aquatic drones, and they just have to bomb one or two of these, make it scary, skyrocket insurance costs because they figured out the insurance situation, unfortunately, and yeah, that's what they have to do because yes, this is concerning. They are moving tonnage through this, not only grain but also they've moved some metallurgical products. So they have to address this very quickly. I agree. This can be a serious problem.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Yeah. So go ahead. Go ahead. Obol.
Hi. Yeah, sorry. Well, my question is, it's two questions, but probably they can be formulated by one. They are sort of similar. Why do you think that European Union is not going to integrate Ukraine properly, like with huge investment and stuff? Because they seem to be fairly determined on integrating it. And the second, you didn't mention that Ukraine indeed did have a serious software industry. Outsourcing startups, it wasn't that bad. So what do you think about their intended perspectives? And Ukraine seems to be very ambitious about it. They have a really strong startup community. To become a thing in software world, to pioneer in drones, in modern something, but you name it. But it doesn't seem completely unrealistic to me.
Yeah. So I mean, one of Ukraine's big things they keep pushing throughout the war is the Dia app, which is the digital transformation, which essentially allows some kind of e-governance kind of system, and allows just notarial acts, allows registering of licenses, businesses to be done online, and to cut down on bureaucracy, which I think overall is a smart direction to go in. And you are right. One of the services that actually saw growth and that actually helped contribute to a higher GDP was, yes, a lot of software developers and a lot of IT guys in general, working remote from Kiev, working remote from all these places, are working for cheaper rates at other companies. I mean, listen, I myself owned a startup, and I worked with guys from Ukraine on some stuff with crypto. And these are good. And I myself am Ukrainian, so that's why I did. But at the end of the day, the reason I didn't mention it is because it's just so small compared to their bread and butter. Their bread and butter is food and metallurgical items. Yes, they have good intentions, with their digital transformation acts. They're going in the right direction. I think it's a smart way to go, and they do have a solid IT community in Kiev and other cities too. But it's just so small compared to everything else. Um, and I've talked about this before, and I'm going to segue into your first question, which is why I don't think the European Union is keen on integrating Ukraine. The reason is because it's too much money. Um, Listen, Ukraine has a GDP per capita just so much smaller than the rest of the European Union. It's integrating Romania, Bulgaria, and Poland it was a gargantuan task, and this is back when the EU had money. This is back when the EU was doing much better. Now they're in deep shit with a lot of stuff. And Ukraine, at the end of the day, has a population of 27, 28 million right now. Maybe it'll be more if they join the EU, because some people go back. Maybe it'll be less as people leave. I don't know. But the thing is, it's so much money. It'll take so much time to clean up the country of all of the corruption, all of the bullshit. That will take decades. That will take minimum 15, 16 years. That's so much time. And who knows where the European project will be at that time. It's going to take some time for Ukraine to get to this level. I mean, listen, Turkey, for example, is in a much better economic position. They haven't taken Turkey in decades. They've been like dangling it over Turkey's like face for decades and decades. Even countries like Serbia and Montenegro are in better positions, and they're not in the European Union. They're in much better positions economically, politically, all of that stuff, and they're not in the European Union. And listen, it'd be nice if you're for some people, if Ukraine was in the European Union, yes, you get access to cheap IT services, you get access to cheap grain. But now there's some people who are against that. Listen, Slovakia, Poland, and their neighbors do not like this cheap grain because it floods the markets and hurts their own guys. And when it comes, and really, they can get the same benefit of getting this cheap stuff with a trade agreement. So maybe they want Ukraine and the EU, but it's so much work and it's so much money when the EU has so many more problems. I really think that this is a case of them dangling it over the face because, you were here earlier, and I told you, before the war, my uncle, Sriko Igor, he told me, listen, um, what's going to happen is that we're going to join the EU. Russia's going to finally fucking leave us alone. We're going to be the country we've always meant to be. We're going to be kind of like Poland, but maybe even better because we have better grounds, we have better soils, we have better harvests, we have a smart, educated population, and we'll be able to go get a baguette on Friday, go to the beach, and then be on time and go to the beach, maybe in Greece, in Italy, and then be back on time on work on Monday morning. This was a fantasy, and this was sold to them to keep it going, because you need something to fight for. They needed Peremocha needed a kind of fantasy to go along with it. It just doesn't exist anymore. The state budget of the European Union cannot subsidize such a large state and integrate it for what it needs to do. So although, listen, I agree with you for the IT and just general software development and data science, Ukraine has a lot of smart guys, a lot of smart women. that are in that field, and they do great stuff. And a lot of people love hiring them because they do it for lower rates, and they still do a pretty damn good job. But it's just so little compared to everything else that it's just not enough to cover the difference.
Being aware how middle class in post-Soviet countries thinks about life and of themselves. Honestly, I don't think that this, Kiev middle class cares about the rest of Ukraine. So probably that actually the one of the most fiercest war supporters, one of the most fiercest anti-Russian forces in Ukraine are not some, Kraken or whatever nationalists, and but the most anti-Russian force in Ukraine, I would say, is the very new businesses, this middle class, these IT guys, these new businesses like Nova Pochta, like startups and stuff. So do you agree with me? Because from my observation, they are the engine for like NATO course, for war effort, for all this stuff. Not really what is called nationalist.
Yeah, so I've actually written a thread. I actually have a nickname for those people. I call them the Kiev intelligentsia, the Kievski intelligentsia. That's what I call them. I've written a thread about this, and I'm actually going to draw a parallel to Syria. So in Syria, a lot of people think, oh, well, it's just the Alawite government of Bashar al-Assad and his supporters. Alawites are only 10% of the population. They're from the coast in Latakia and Tartus, and they're holding down all the Sunnis. No. The actual supporters of Bashar al-Assad were that middle class in Aleppo, in Damascus, that were getting money as Bashar, unlike his father, transferred focus from the rural to the urban, and a lot of this new business class started popping up and started making much more money. But yes, I agree completely. The Kievski intelligentsia, they don't give a fuck what Mykola Mykolenko does in Ivano-Frankivsk. They don't give a fuck. They think they're all stupid. They think people from Galiciani, from Policia, are stupid. But the thing is, they made a deal with the Banderites and just the general crazies. And I did write a thread. I'll find it. I'll maybe even try to send it to you. Maybe not a thread, but maybe a response thread where I talked about this. That the Kievski intelligentsia, they decided that they will throw their hat in with these guys, that these guys will be the attack dogs. They'll be the attack dogs that they're going to control. And they want the true European victory. The idea in which, listen, we have a modern capital, we have good, solid IT services. The European Union is going to invest. They're going to make some cool new infrastructure projects. A lot of young people are going to move here. It's going to be awesome. A lot more people are going to speak English. It's going to be great. We're going to do this digital transformation. We're going to have this great startup culture, while the rest of the country, which their bread and butter is agriculture and metallurgical products, suffers, and they don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck as the rural states, as villages drop from 500 to 50 people, just old people left. So yeah, I definitely agree. I've talked about this before, and yes, they're definitely strange bedfellows. The Kievski intelligentsia and the Banderites, and they're strange bedfellows, but they are the reason why Baidan happened in the end. Yeah.
Actually, I have an impression that the Galicians. So I guess you're a Galician, right? You mentioned that you are from Lvov.
Yes.
And I have an impression that actually the rural population of Western Ukraine, it's usually portrayed as the driving force of the war, but I think it's on the contrary. It seems like they are one of the most sacrificed part of society, and real driving force of the war is, middle and upper class of big Ukrainian cities like Kiev, Dnipropetrovsk and stuff, because they want to get their, they think, rightful place in European society. And generally, I think they don't care how much Galicians or guys from, Nikolaev Oblast or whatever will die for this. That's, at least that looks like it for me.
Yeah, of course. All right. Does anyone else want to quickly jump in? All right, everybody. Well, thank you for stopping by. Thank you for everybody who was a speaker. I think we had some good conversations, and like I said, hopefully this gave some kind of understanding, some kind of basis for which we can go off of and understand the war. Well, thank you guys. I plan on making more spaces, so I'll let you know. And yep, see ya.